Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. How are you doing? I'm John Murphy, writer and producer on the science and technology series Innovation Nation with Mo Rocca, which airs Saturday mornings on CBS. Please check your local listings for air times. And now I venture around the country to just sit down and talk to regular people over double cheeseburgers, chili cheese fries, and étouffée. Love saying that, étouffée. About their lives, their cities, and how they feel overall about America. I'm in the middle of a series of episodes surrounding a true crime, originating from the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis, Nebraska, known all over for their prime rib and other grub. I mean, that's what they call their food menu, just grub. You can see it for yourself on their website at anvilbarandgrill.com, all one word, anvilbarandgrill.com. For this week's episode, I'll be talking once again with former Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee about the Hoyt murder case, which happened 50 years ago in southwest Nebraska, and we'll focus on different aspects of the investigation itself. We'll also hear from former Nebraska State Patrol investigator Jack Sexton and the author of the book about the case, In Cold Storage, Mr. James Hewitt. To kind of catch you up real quick, a rural farm couple, Edwin and Wilma Hoyt, were last seen alive nearly 50 years ago on Sunday, September 23, 1973. And then 10 days later on Wednesday, October the 3rd, their body parts began washing up along the Medicine Creek Dam on Harry Strunk Lake, better known to locals as Cambridge Lake, because it's just north of the town of Cambridge, Nebraska, which, by the way, is where Kool-Aid was invented. Yeah, Kool-Aid. But that's a whole other podcast. Now, earlier that summer, one of the Hoyt's daughters, Kay Hein, a divorced single mother, was caught up in a very nasty scandal when her name appeared on numerous road signs. And the sign said things like, Kay Hein is hot ass, $10, call 345, and then they gave the rest of her phone number. Or, Kay Hein is a good fuck, just ask blank, and any number of men's names would be filled in on that blank. An investigation was launched by the Red Willow County Sheriff's Office in McCook, Nebraska, and the Nebraska State Patrol. The investigating officers were William Tumlin for the State Patrol and Deputy Don Hagan for the Sheriff's Department. In all, as many as 11 different men had sexual encounters with Kay Hein, along with a married couple, Harold and Ena Nokes. According to James Hewitt's book, there was even a bit of a scandal during the investigation itself. And I'm reading directly from the book now. One retired member of the patrol later said that Tumlin and the deputy from Red Willow County, Don Hagan, who handled the graffiti investigation, were much more interested in Kay Hein than they were in finding the perpetrator. They were rumored to have spent several nights at Kay's house to, quote-unquote, protect her, a gratuitous act since none of the signs had been painted at her house, and there had been no harm except to her and the named men's reputations. Such an allegation about the conduct of Tumlin and Hagan is serious and should have led to an investigation. The accusation, though, may well have simply reflected the patrol's feelings about Tumlin after his resignation. On August 24th, Tumlin submitted a report regarding the obscene messages and closed the investigation, although his report did state that the case remained active. Tumlin abruptly resigned a week later, on September the 1st. Now, in all full disclosure, I do have a copy of Tumlin's full report, but I will not post it because it names the individuals involved with Kay, and while most of them were certainly guilty of adultery, they were all cleared of having anything to do with the gruesome murder of the Hoyts. And that's why the case files were sealed by District Judge Hendricks for over 40 years to protect their identities. Investigators quickly turned their focus on Harold and Ena Nokes as it became clear Kay was involved in a long-term three-way love affair with them. But the Nokeses were not too cooperative in the beginning. After the body parts were discovered and Kay Hein told the cops everything she knew about Harold and Ena and what she had done with them, the Nokeses were brought in for questioning. Here's the first report on Harold Nokes. It's dated October the 9th, 1973, 6 days after the body parts were discovered. Harold is interviewed by Lieutenant Donald Grebe of the Nebraska State Patrol, and these are Grebe's notes here. Harold Nokes stated that on September 23, 1973, that he went over to his brother's house, Lloyd Nokes, and McCook for dinner. He advised that his wife was with him and that they left there between 3 and 4 p.m. in the afternoon. He stated that they went home, and at about 8 or 8:30 they went to Peter's Drive-In for supper. He then stated they then drove to Culbertson, Nebraska, arriving there about 9 o'clock, and wanted to see his parents who live in Culbertson. He advised that the lights were out in his parents' home, and he and his wife returned to McCook and stayed there the rest of the evening. Harold claimed he did not see the Hoyt car during his trip to Culbertson and back on the evening of September 23rd. Harold Nokes denied any knowledge as to what happened to Mr. and Mrs. Hoyt and claimed he was willing to tell us anything to help clear this case for us. And here's the report on Ena, taken October the 11th, 2 days later, 1973. Ena Nokes was given her rights by this officer, and she stated she did understand these rights. At this time, the officer explained to Ena the story which Kay Hein had given to the officers with reference to the three-way sex between her, Ena Nokes, Harold Nokes, and Kay Hein. She showed no emotion at this time and only stated, quote, "You cannot prove that," unquote. She denied that it was true. She advised that apparently after her husband Harold had talked to investigator Sawden with reference to the missing Hoyts, he then came home and told her about their sexual relations with Kay Hein. She advised this was the first time that she ever knew about it, and after discussing it with him, she then forgave him. At the conclusion of this interview, it should be noted that at no time did Ena Nokes show any emotions over the things we had talked about. She appeared to be very cold about the whole thing. Now, much later, during a confession with Lancaster County Attorney Paul Douglas, Harold Nokes finally admits what really happened that night. This is American Gothic, Love and Murder, Part 4.
During that day, you want to know what happened that day, I went to my brother's for dinner. My folks was there, and I believe my sister and her husband was there.
And then what did you do after that?
We went home until approximately about, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock.
And what happened at 7:30 or 8 o'clock?
Yeah, we went out, had a sandwich at the drive-in.
And when you say we, you're saying
who? And my dad had been real bad and said to drive by and see if he was there.
Where does your dad live?
Culbertson.
And did you go there?
Yes, went by there and the lights was out.
And then what happened?
I felt real bad about Mr. Hoyt called me a couple of times.
Excuse me, let's stop that. You said this had come up. Now tell me what you're saying.
That Mr. Hoyt had called a couple of times.
When did he call you?
That was long in the summer. He called.
This was before they went to Germany?
Yes. And he said that I've been blackmailing Kay. And so this evening, on the 23rd, I thought that I would drive out and maybe we could get misunderstandings straightened out. That's what I went out for.
Okay, now, where were you when you made up your mind you were going to go over and see Mr. Hoyt to get the misunderstanding straightened out?
That's where we left home, I guess. I decided from there to go by the folks and see if they was all right. And if they wasn't, I'd probably going out and see if they were home.
And suppose your folks were all right, would you stay there and talk with your folks?
If they'd have been up, I'd probably stop and I probably would have got out there.
You wouldn't have gone to the Hoyts?
Probably not that night.
Okay, and how did you go? By automobile?
Yes.
And what kind of an automobile do you have?
1974.
Now, did you take anything in particular with you when you went?
My shoulder was such that I knew that he might get violent, and I took the gun along, just figured if there was trouble, it might stop trouble and I'd get away from there without any trouble.
And what did you do with your gun?
I put it in my belt under my coat.
Did you load it?
Yes, it was loaded.
How many shells does it hold?
9, I believe.
What kind of a weapon is it?
A 22 Ruger pistol.
Where is that pistol now?
Investigator's had it.
And what did your wife say when you got the pistol?
I don't know that she knew I had it.
Then did you drive out to your folks?
Yes.
And were your folks home?
Yes, and the light was out.
And from there, where did you drive to?
Drove out to the Hoyt.
And what time did you get to the Hoyt's farm?
That I don't know, but I would guess 8:30, probably 8:30, I don't know.
And what did you do when you got there?
We got there, we went to the door and knocked, and Mr. Hoyt come to the door. And I told him I'd like to talk to him a little bit, and so he invited us in.
And did you and your wife both go in?
Yes, right.
Did you get seated?
We just stood and talked.
And where was Mrs. Hoyt?
I don't know whether they'd been getting ready for bed or not. She come out and had a house coat on, and I know she sat a little while, and it's possibly that I might have sat down. I don't know. I just comes up. I really couldn't tell you whether I sat down or not.
And after you got in and you said you wanted to talk to him, what did he say?
He said come in, and I told him I'd like to get some of the things straightened out, and they both said that they'd like nothing better than to get some of this straightened up, that it had been a terrible mess.
And then what was said by anyone?
We visited about it a while, and
Okay, when you say we visited, who said what? Do you recall?
I brought up the fact that when we visited that he was unhappy about Kay coming to our house and staying when she got out of the hospital. They indicated that Kay told them that we begged her to come to the house and stay with us instead of going out. But Kay had told us that she wouldn't come out and she wouldn't get out of the hospital. She'd stay in the hospital before she'd come and stay with the folks. So I thought things was getting kind of squared away. He said that, well, you're bound to believe one of your kids when something like this comes up. And I mentioned the fact that they didn't think it'd be a good idea for all of us to go to town and go to our place, and we'd call Kay and have her come over, and we could sit down and discuss everything and see that things get straightened out as nearly as possible.
Who suggested that?
I did.
And what did he say to that?
They said they'd like nothing better.
So what did they do?
They changed their clothes and got ready to go.
And then what happened?
I told them that this involved me mostly, that if they wanted to, we could ride together, and the wife could bring the other car, and that way we could talk on the way to town. So they rode with me on the way to town.
They rode in whose car?
My car. I drove my car, and the wife brought their car into town.
And did all of you sit in the front seat?
Yes, Mrs. Hoyt and then Mr. Hoyt on the outside.
Okay, and as you were driving to McCook, was there some conversation?
Yes, we visited about different things.
What did you visit about?
Well, one thing was, well, the car, for example. I gave Kay the money when she bought her car. She could afford it. I loaned her the money.
How much did you loan her?
$600, interest-free, and then she paid this $600 back whenever she got a few dollars extra, which she didn't, so on there.
Okay. What else did you talk about?
A lot of it was this, when she got out of the hospital, I was, well, Mrs. Hoyt had laid off work to take care of Kay, I guess. And Kay had told him that we pretty much insisted that she come to our place to stay. Well, that irritated greatly. And I could kind of understand that after I find out that she told him this. And that's the first I'd heard about this at all.
Who was doing the talking?
All three of us.
Okay.
We drove to my house, and I drove in first in the drive, and then the wife parked her car in behind.
And then what happened?
We all went to the front room, and
Was there any hostility or ill feeling at this time?
on the way to town, we was getting pretty near to town, and Mr. Hoyt wasn't believing what I was telling him, and he thought I was lying to him. That Kay wanted to come to our house and stay, that asked us to.
And he thought you were lying?
Yes, that's the way,
Did he say you were lying?
he said he didn't believe it. He said that his daughter told him different. He had to believe what she said.
Okay. So now the purpose in going to your house was what at that point?
We went to my house and thought we'd call Kay over, and then we could clarify what was right.
Now, obviously, something went horribly wrong because the Hoyts were never seen again. And next week, you'll hear exclusively, for the first time, Harold Nokes tell the story of what happened that night in their basement. On a personal note, I can't help but notice Harold's term for Ena. He just calls her the wife, like she's a thing, a piece of furniture. It sounds so detached to me. He never calls her Ena or even my wife, just the wife. I mean, after 25 years of marriage, was that all she was to him, a servant of some kind? In other transcripts, Harold even refers to his son as the boy. Never mentioned his son's name. I mean, is there something behind that? I don't know. But it really just stood out to me. Author James Hewitt has his own theory about what happened the night of September 23rd.
I think that Harold went out to see the Hoyts for some devious purpose of his own. Why would you drive them into your house in McCook? Especially Ena apparently drove the Hoyts' car, and the Hoyts rode with Harold, which strikes me as being crazy, but
under the guise of we're going to go back to our house in town, Kay's going to come by, and all of us are going to sit down and we're going to talk about this relationship and resolve any issues that we have.
That's what they said they were going to do. One of the mysteries of this whole thing was that Kay apparently, and Owen and Donna talked about this, Kay had apparently hired a girl whom they knew, a young high school girl, to come and babysit her children while she went somewhere the evening in question.
That their parents went missing.
And they thought that this was a situation where she was going to go over to their house, to Nokes' house, when Nokes brought the family in. It's not the way trained criminals respond to situations of this kind. Yeah. You just think these poor people just didn't know what the hell to do.
I met up with former Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee at the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis, Nebraska, to talk about the challenges in trying to prove the case against the Nokeses.
There was just no direct evidence that we could use to prove that it was Harold and Ena killing those people at this point.
From a criminal investigation standpoint, as a police officer, or law officer, when a murder is committed, number one, you want to find the bodies, right?
Right.
So you found that.
Right.
But you want to find the murder weapon. You want to find any evidence that pertains to the crime scene or where it happened.
Right.
Unfortunately for you, back in 1973, there wasn't forensic science, was there?
Not a great deal. No, that's correct.
So what was your process? How did you start whittling down and focusing from this kind of, it could be this guy that she dated down to the Nokeses?
The day that I discovered the arm at the lake and talked to Kay Hein, it pretty well zeroed in on what we were going to be trying to prove, and that was Harold and Ena Nokes did this. But to make that proof happen was pretty difficult.
And what was your process? What was the first thing that you tried to do?
Along the way, we got a warrant to go in and put listening devices in their home so we could hear what they were saying.
Like the old Watergate trick.
There you go. There you go.
The old Watergate trick.
Well, this is pretty wild deal. We met with Judge Hendricks in Red Willow County in the evening. One of the other things was that we were monitored all the time what we were doing. And if we would go to court, we would have lots of people in court listening to what was going on. And of course, you can't go in and get a listening device and let everybody in town know you're going to be listening.
Yeah, because in the press, this is the crime of the century, and it's on the front page every single day.
Well, that's right. And so...
Was it tough to convince him?
Oh, no. And he issued the warrant. It was basically a search warrant to go in and...
Implant listening devices or eavesdropping devices.
New law in the state of Nebraska. That was the first time that law had been applied, and we did that.
So how did you get the eavesdropping devices into their house?
We went in through the back door and into the house and installed them got in the attic and put them in the lights.
Were they at work?
They were at work, and we were monitoring each one of them to be sure that they weren't going to show up at the house.
Wait a second. So you're doing this during the day?
Yes.
Regular daytime hours?
Yes.
Were people, the neighbors, watching you guys do this?
Yes.
What, did anybody, a neighbor, walk over and go, "Excuse me, what are you doing breaking into my neighbor's house?"
Yes, that did happen.
Oh my gosh, this is not stealthy or anything. This is not like that investigative movie thing where you're breaking in the middle of the night and you're all sleuth. You're just
right.
How did you get into the house? Did somebody just jerry-rig the door?
We had a guy with the State Patrol that could pick locks, and he picked the lock on the back door. He come in from Sidney, Nebraska. He was a criminal investigator out there, and we.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Yeah,
that is funny. Did you have to tell the neighbors not to say anything?
Yeah, we said, well, this was law enforcement situation, and we were just needing to go in. So, and they were shocked because these were good neighbors. This was good people in this neighborhood. So, like I said, the State Patrol did provide somebody to get us in the house, and they actually installed the equipment in the house.
How long did it take to do that?
Oh, about an hour maybe.
And where did you set up the listening station?
Well, that's an interesting thing. We went to a motel and rented a room and set it up and listened, but it wasn't quite as good as what we wanted to do.
The reception.
That's right.
Okay.
So there was a dispatcher for the State Patrol just lived down the block. So we set up in his place, and that worked pretty good.
He lived close to the Nokes' residence.
That's right.
How many hours did you spend listening to the Nokes? Now, first of all, where did you install the eavesdropping devices specifically?
Kitchen light, living room light, bedroom light.
You listened in on their bedroom activities?
We did.
You little perv.
Yeah. And there was action there.
Really? Why wouldn't there be? It's Harold Nokes, for goodness sakes, right? How long did you monitor the situation?
I think a week, 5 days to a week is about what it went. Somebody keeps track of how many miles of tape we ran, but we actually run two systems. We run a system that stayed on constantly.
Gotcha.
And then we had systems that we turned on when they were at home. But we wanted to be sure that we didn't start and stop something so that we would draw suspicion to how we were operating. So we had the 5 miles of tape, and if you wanted to listen to the whole thing, and then we also had the piece when they were there and we could listen to them.
And what did you hear on these tapes? What did they say that got them kind of, incriminated?
Well, it was pretty darned interesting. They didn't talk much about the crime. They talked about the investigation more than they did. They followed me again today. They were sitting outside of the school waiting for me to come out. And Harold said, yeah, I know. They watch me all day, too. They follow me and when I'm at work. And that was kind of the tone of it. And they said if we would have just taken those rings off, we would have.
And that's actually true. If they had taken the rings off, you would have never known for sure.
Well, we would have known, but it wouldn't have been quite so evident,
Yeah.
We would have had to do a lot more research with the body parts and so forth. But
because what they said was privileged information. Not everybody knew that. Was that public?
That's right. No.
You didn't release that to the press that they are identified by the rings.
Oh, no.
Former State Patrol investigator Jack Sexton recalls monitoring the Nokeses at home.
Oh, yes. I spent 12 hours at a time in a motel room listening to the wire. We had the deputy sheriff out of Lincoln come out and install the system. And then it was installed wrong to start with. We were all sitting there, and they come home. We kicked on our tape, and they turned on the TV, and it was all black. And so I heard Miss say to Mister, well, what's wrong with our TV? So it was working this morning when we left. And Jim Short said, uh-oh. And he got on the phone. They were going to call this repairman to come out and check it. And Jim knew him, so he called him, told him what we were doing, and not to tip it off. He come out, and all he had to do was change the location of the plug. I'm not an installer or anything like that. And it worked all right, and he never said anything to them what was going on. Or he could have spilled the whole thing.
There were some things that happened there that are pretty interesting. For one thing, we were having a little trouble hearing them because they had the TV on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's not good. So there's a TV antenna on the house with a lead in. So I said, well, I'll just slip over there and cut that, and that'll take care of the TV. So that's what I did. But then, guess what? It didn't slow the TV down a bit. So we discovered that they had cable TV.
So you cut an antenna cable.
Yes.
So in the old days, before most of us got cable, we used to get our TV signals over the air with an antenna, like a radio.
Right.
But it was a video signal, and you'd have an antenna on the roof of your house, and it would feed the television.
That was the deal. That's the story.
And you thought you would cut that thing and
we
take care of
thought
it.
we really had a deal. So
Sergeant Sexton also remembers one thing that bothered him when he was monitoring the Nokeses. He's being interviewed by book author James Hewitt.
We heard a lot of conversation, and some of it was of value, and most of
A lot of it was not. And you had to sit there and listen to the whole thing.
I remember him talking about me, which wasn't too pleasant right at first.
Sexton talks about some other challenges of conducting a criminal investigation in a small town.
I think she worked for the school system, and he was a superintendent or had some rank with the Department of Roads. Right in the next room from us, all separated us, was a door.
Oh, really? Your offices were in the same building?
Joining each other, yes. That was kind of embarrassing.
Well, I can understand.
I'm trying to plot him.
You never know if he's sitting in there listening to what's going on.
Author Hewitt believes Ena Nokes was able to manipulate Harold into doing certain things on the night of the 23rd.
I think Harold was a fairly decent human being who just got caught up in a situation where he had no way of knowing what he ought to do. And suddenly he was faced with these two dead bodies in his basement. And what do I do? I think Ena said, you ought to get rid of them. Cut them up.
The Nebraska State Patrol had a strong suspicion the Nokeses had dismembered the Hoyts' bodies in their home and thought they had a surefire way to prove it.
The State Patrol actually went in and got a search warrant in Red Willow County to search the basement of that house, but where the actual cutting up happened. The results of the lab was that it was chicken blood in the drain.
No human blood at all.
No, nothing from human.
Well, the Nokeses were known for being hunters.
Oh, yeah.
They could field dress a deer, both Harold and Ena, which is very interesting. They were experts at doing that.
Part of what we figured out was that Harold got sick and had to go to the bathroom and throw up while they were doing the cutting up. Mm-hmm. And he was really emotional about what was going on, and which we verified by the tapes and just by our investigation.
I know at one point in the case, a forensic psychiatrist was employed from Denver to give you some strategies on how to deal with that. What did this psychiatrist say to you?
I didn't talk directly to him, but he did go through the county attorney. He told us that if this guy was taken into custody, he's going to have to declare this to somebody. He will talk about this thing. He's got to. Otherwise, it's going to ruin his health.
Well, they weren't career criminals. They were just average people caught up in a heinous moment, in a heinous act.
Right. We knew that Harold was having some health problems along the way.
James Hewitt thinks the key mistake the Nokeses made was, in fact, cutting up the bodies.
My God, if anybody had stopped and thought about it, you could take a couple of dead bodies in the dead of night, a nice choice of phrase, but you could take them out there and just lay them on the ground, and the coyotes would eat them within 2 days. He should have done that. If he had, I think it would have been a long time before anybody figured out what he had really done and where the bodies were. He could say, well, yeah, I didn't like Edwin and Wilma, and they were tough on me, but I didn't kill them. I don't know what happened to them. Where are they? And people who are coming from a sort of a working class background never really analyzed what to do in a situation of this kind. I would think in McCook, and McCook does not strike me as being a Sodom of Nebraska, but I would think it would be pretty tough to keep what was going on undercover. People had to know that they were having an affair, and it could have brazened it out, I think. The lady who lives across the street has a sister who is a nurse at the penitentiary. And I said, "Did you ever know Harold Nokes?" She said, "Well, I give him his meds every day. He's harmless."
The secret taping of the Nokes' conversations was not generating much vital information that incriminated them in the killing of Edwin and Wilma Hoyt. Remembering what the psychiatrist had said about Harold, he needs to talk about what happened. Sheriff Roblee decided to try something different.
So went to Harold's door and knocked on the door. And he came to the door, and I said, "Harold, I've got a list of questions I want to ask you. But I know that you need to talk to your attorney about this. So what I want you to do is to take this list of questions and go over it with your attorney and see if he'll allow you to answer these questions."
No bait and switch.
I gave him the paperwork, and obviously what we thought we were going to have was him and Ena sitting there going over the questions. Didn't happen.
Not at all.
Not at all. But what they did say was, well, they're going to arrest us for this. We're pretty sure of that. So what we're going to do is, when they arrest us, the night that first night in jail, we're both going to kill ourselves.
Wow.
We're going to commit suicide in jail if they arrest us. And the way they're going to do that, they talked about. So
what was their plan?
Their plan was that they had enough drugs in their clothes to take and would kill them. But when we locked him up, when we actually put him in jail.
Before you get there, when did you decide that you were actually formally going to arrest them? Was it after the tapes?
After the tapes, and so, yes, that would be, we felt we had probable cause to make an arrest.
And you personally made the arrest?
I did.
What was Harold Nokes' reaction, and where did you arrest him?
I arrested him on the streets of McCook. He had a crew there cleaning snow, and we pulled up, and I stepped out with a warrant and arrested him and put him in the car, and we left.
Put handcuffs on him?
I did.
And he was working for the Nebraska Department of Roads, because that's why he was out cleaning snow.
He was the foreman of the crew.
And what about Ena, his wife?
I wasn't involved with her arrest, but she was at the school, and I don't know whether they actually went into the school or waited till she left the school, but then they arrested her.
The plan was to separate the Nokeses after they were arrested. Ena was taken to North Platte because that was the nearest location where there was a women's jail. Authorities found 81 pills sewn into Ena's bra and in her purse. Roblee remanded Harold to the Frontier County Jail in Curtis and knew what Harold had on him. Like, what, just pills?
Oh, yeah.
Like street pills?
I don't know what they were, but I knew that Harold had them on him when we put him in jail, and I did. I let him go back into the jail, and I left him, and then seconds later, I'd go back and say, "Oh, Harold, just come out here a minute. I forgot something." And then I searched him and found, "Oh, here, look at here." And I pulled all of those pills out. He had them clear around his belt.
Hidden in his belt, he had all these pills.
Yes.
To commit suicide.
Yeah, and now I had his pills. And he wanted to call his lawyer. And I said, "Well, we can try to call your lawyer." Along the way, I had a poster board with all the rights on it.
His Miranda rights.
Pasted in the door, in the jail. And
so outside the jail, there's like bars there, and then right on the outside of the bars, you've got this poster board with all his Miranda rights.
Right.
Handwritten out?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's old school, man.
Yeah.
You didn't have a pre-printed Miranda thing? You could just like pop up there?
No. And I had it was, a big poster board. And I said, "Harold, there's your rights. You can read it. Can you read them to me?" "Yeah, do you understand it?" "Yeah, I do." I said, "Well, okay, I'll talk to you then. But the only thing I want to talk about is this crime."
So you left him alone unless he wanted to talk about the crime.
That's right.
You left him to his own mind.
He was the only one in there. And we talked about the psychiatrist.
Yes.
And what he said. This is what he said. He'll have to talk to somebody.
Because you separated Harold and Ena.
That's right. And they were both going to kill themselves that night, and we knew they were both planning to do that, but we stopped them from doing it. But he couldn't call her. He didn't know.
He didn't know if she went through with it or not.
That's exactly right.
So his mind started to like twist on itself.
That's right.
Is she alive? Is she dead? Am I the only one alive?
And can I call my attorney? He had a poor relationship with his attorney, and he couldn't even get him on the phone to see.
Like his attorney was blowing him off?
Wasn't available.
Really?
Yeah.
The guy's life is on the line and the attorney's not available.
That's right.
Oh, my gosh.
And this is the only guy we let him call. Wouldn't let him talk to anybody else, and we wouldn't tell him anything about Ena's situation, of course, so that's how it went.
So when you had him in jail, what was his demeanor like, and what was he going through health-wise?
Had his head hanging low. Blood pressure was way high. We had nurses check his blood. He wouldn't talk. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't do anything. He was just, he didn't know whether his wife was dead or alive, and he didn't want to talk about the crime, and that's the only option that he had if he wanted to talk to somebody.
So you just left him alone.
Yeah. Well, and then
isolation really trips people up.
Oh, yeah. I heard a scraping back there after we had taken his pills away, and I went back in there, and he had taken a lens out of his glasses, and he was sharpening it up and cutting his wrist and had blood on his...
He's trying to kill himself.
Oh, yeah.
Did I also hear that the jail cell in the Frontier County Jail is also very noisy because you have like the town generator there or something like that? It was like just obsessive noise.
Well, there was a constant noise. The generator plant was just next door to us there.
It's like an episode out of Green Acres.
Well, there you go. Well, that's just a little 4-cell area and he's the only one in there.
Harold, you can call your lawyer, but you have to crawl on top of the telephone pole like Ebb from Green Acres and get your lawyer on the phone.
Well,
Then have Mr. Hein come down and bring you a chisel and try and dig your way out.
Oh dear. Well, it was an interesting situation for Harold. My question was, with Harold Nokes in such a state of mind that he couldn't hardly stay alive because of his health, because he had nobody to talk to. And then after he confessed to me, his blood pressure went down. He could smile again. Did
he start eating?
He started eating. His whole life changed back to more of a normal person in jail. But if he wasn't guilty, and if he wasn't telling the truth, why did we have such a fluctuation in his health?
I think it's a very valid point, because there's only so much a person can internalize when it comes to their guilt, their shame, their regrets, whatever.
Right. Right.
There does come a point where it does eat you alive from the inside out.
That's right.
And it was starting to do that to him, and it became unbearable.
That's right. Yeah. As long as we kept him in that situation and he had no way to express himself except for what I wanted to talk to him about, he finally gave up and said he'd talk.
When he laid out the story, what did he tell you?
He told me where he just threw the gun, what he did with the clothes off the people.
Did he say why, though? Why kill the parents? Why? If he was mad at Kay Hein,
well,
why kill the parents?
Because they were not happy because Kay was involved with the situation where they were writing nasty stuff on the road signs, and they didn't like that a bit, and they were putting pressure on her to find out what was going on, and I don't know that they ever directly talked to him.
We did hear from Harold in previous episodes that he was jealous about Kay seeing other men in town and contributed to painting the vulgar signs about her, but not all of them. He was angry that Kay and or her father told his beloved uncle, Dr. McConaughey, about the affair, which fractured their relationship. And Harold was angry that Edwin Hoyt had accused the Nokeses of blackmailing Kay for money, an idea that she may have placed in her father's head. Also, Harold's shoulder was severely dislocated during an earlier altercation with Hein.
The thing about Harold Nokes is, and the injury to that arm was maybe more mentally involved than just physically. It might not have been hurt near as bad as what he thought, but he carried it in a sling now, and he had his left arm, and he had the gun in his belt, he told me, when he was dealing with this guy. And I don't know that he intended to kill him. I think in the involvement in that basement, Harold got scared and pulled the gun and
Just shot
him one time, left-handed, bang.
Do you believe the account that Wilma screamed out, "Why didn't you kill Kay"?
I don't have any doubt. I don't doubt it. I don't, one way or the other. Could have happened, should have happened, probably did happen. She started up the stairs to leave, and he shot her, and she fell back down. And I don't find that any reason to believe that it didn't happen that way.
That there was no reason for Harold just to make something up out of thin air.
Well, no, I don't know why he would. I think what we were hearing from Harold was how he felt life was and whether he was just exactly accurate about everything would be just like anybody else. You might not have exactly the same thought process, but that's how Harold felt it happened. After going through it and over it with him, I believe what he said. We didn't talk just one time. We talked more than one time, because when I would have a question about what'd you do with the clothes, and he said, well, I took them to the state yard in Culbertson and burned them. And we checked
the burn yard, and you could find
sure enough,
remnants
he had
of it.
A fire going on down there, and he put the axe that he chopped him up with out in a creek south of Culbertson. And we spent a lot of time looking for that and never did find that. The gun that he used, he put in another lake, and we couldn't find that.
So actually kind of smart.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were pretty thorough in trying to cover up their tracks.
Oh, absolutely. After this happened, then
because you guys are kind of stymied for evidence, and, to try and build the case against them.
Oh, yeah.
They were good at disposing of any clues that pointed to them.
With just a few little miscalculations, if we'd have just taken those rings off of their hand.
What was Harold's reaction when you said, "Oh, by the way, Ena's just fine"?
I didn't say that.
You never did. You
No,
never told him.
We never discussed it.
When did he finally find out that she was okay and still alive?
Well, it was after he confessed. Let's put it that way.
Now, you have to understand, this case was so infamous and shocking in the state of Nebraska, it became political to a degree. Governor J.J. Exxon sat in on meetings with investigators to learn more about the murders and what law enforcement was doing to solve them. And when Harold Nokes broke down and confessed to Lannie Roblee, that was only part one of the process, like the TV show Law and Order. The cops got their man and woman, but what was the law going to do with them?
When he told me the story, I was sitting here and he was sitting there.
Like you and I are sitting.
That's exactly right.
That's how close you were.
And I took notes just like where I'm taking right now. None. I just visited with him about what happened.
So then he had to retell the story in front of a stenographer.
Well,
under oath, didn't he?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, that was another political situation.
Why?
Paul Douglas was the Lancaster County attorney, and he was running for the Attorney General of the state of Nebraska.
So Lancaster County is the county that Lincoln the state capital.
Sure. And so my county attorney, Mr. Schroeder, was a classmate of his, so he was calling on him to get information. So then when it come time to take the
confession,
we called Paul, and Paul come out and sit down. And
oh, you're kidding me.
Oh, no.
It was a political move just to make him look good?
Oh, well.
Wow. Everybody in the room here is shaking their head. Like, yeah.
And he had a stenographer.
Why didn't your county attorney do it?
Well, but he was a buddy of Paul's, and you know,
And Paul was running for election.
and on top of that, you know, there again, you know, we were from Frontier County, and we're not into this confessing from murders. You know, what do you?
Okay, so you're not experienced enough to handle this. Is that what he was saying?
I think that'd be right. I think he wanted to get, and he had that was a good call, you know.
So you were leaning in on his expert advice as a district attorney in a bigger city that had real crime,
right?
To do the interrogation and the confession with Harold to make sure every single button and bow was buttoned up.
That's exactly right.
I see.
He had his stenographer there and the court reporter, you know, and and it was a big deal.
Because, you know, when it comes down to it, are you going to get Sheriff Andy or are you going to get Deputy Fife to do this? So
that's kind of where we were at. And I knew what I knew, and I listened to what he had to say, and I knew he would once we'd been through it.
In one of the transcripts of that interrogation that you talk about with Paul Douglas, you did pipe up, and I read it this morning prior to our interview, about Harold hurting his arm and using a left hand. He's a right-handed shooter with a pistol, using his left hand, taking the safety off, all in a matter of seconds, and firing it. How could that possibly be? You challenged him on that.
Right.
And were you satisfied with his answer and response?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Harold had a plan. If you were going to try to protect yourself and carry a gun, you damn sure would be able to use it, or you wouldn't even have brought it with you.
Got it.
And so you talk about cocking it and loading it and all that, but don't you suppose that he had that figured out before we ever went through it? I think he just pulled and bam.
So it was ready to go.
Oh, I'm positive it would have been. He had that pistol for his own protection. It wasn't to kill Ed. But in reality, you know, he
killed Ed out of protecting himself from getting punched in the face by Ed.
I think he was prepared to kill him, but I don't know that was exactly his motive. If it's necessary, I'm going to kill him.
And he did. And then Wilma screams, "Why didn't you kill Kay?" Starts fleeing for her life up the stairs. And he has no choice but to shoot her in the back because
Right.
she can't get away.
Right.
And that was the first degree murder.
Now we've got everybody laying here dead, and what do we do with them?
Because they're in our basement, and our basement's in a house that's surrounded by other houses in the city of McCook, and I got a hurt arm.
Right. So we decide to cut them up, and wrap them up, and freeze them. And then later on, we take them out and we put the parts in the boat, pull the boat to the lake, go out into the lake and start throwing them out.
And that's coming up next week. Harold Nokes' full confession in his own words, exclusively for the first time ever in 50 years, on American Gothic, Love and Murder, Part 5.
And you shot.
Yes.
And that would have been right in front of the doorway then.
I'd have been about one step inside, and he'd probably been about 2 steps inside the doorway.
And when you shot, what happened?
He staggered backwards and fell against the sink. Well, it had been towards a little bit of an angle.
And after he fell, what did you do?
I just stepped back, and Mrs. Hoyt started screaming, and she said, "Why did you kill Kay?"
Well, there you go. That wraps up another episode of Across the Dinerverse. A huge thank you to Marvin Fisher and the entire staff at the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis, Nebraska for hosting this podcast series. You can learn more about them again at anvilbarandgrill.com. That's all one word, anvilbarandgrill.com. Thank you to retired Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee and author James Hewitt for their contributions, including case files and audio recordings. Mr. Hewitt's book in cold storage is available through the University of Nebraska Press or Amazon. And if you like the podcast and want to support the show, please visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dinerverse. Original theme music by Keith Brock and the Kings Who Rock. This is Across the Dinerverse, always searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. What's your story?